Thank you. Thank you very much for having me via Skype. I would have loved to join you in person and was looking into plane tickets, but I had a prior commitment here at Stanford today where I'm also giving another talk, and so the flights just didn't work out. But I'm excited to share with you some of what we're doing at Stanford and at Coursera. I'm a Stanford professor and co-founder of Coursera. Most people today will never have access to a Stanford class, but we're changing that. Working with such great schools in the US as Stanford, Princeton, Caltech, Columbia, Penn, and many others, as well as great schools from all around the world, we're taking courses from all of these universities and putting them online, free for anyone to take. We're using technology to offer high-quality education at scale. Today, half of the world's top 60 universities are working with us to create free online courses, including the number one or two or both in 14 different countries. So let me share with you my story. As a Stanford professor, I usually teach a 400-student Stanford class. The way Coursera had gotten started was 2 years ago, I put my class online, and it reached an audience of 100,000 students. To put that number in context, for me to reach a comparable size audience, I would otherwise have had to teach at Stanford University for 250 years. Since launching Coursera about 2 years ago, we've now partnered with over 80 university and other educational institutions, and with over 400 courses and nearly 5 million students, we're by far the largest MOOC or massive open online courses platform in the world. So why do so many students want to take our classes? I think it is that, first and foremost, these are real courses. Every course begins on a certain day. It then runs for a fixed period of time, say 10 weeks in the case of my class. This is a plot of the web traffic in my class as it was offered for the first time. And those peaks, those regular heartbeats spaced about 1 week apart, those are homework deadlines. Every time a homework is due on the website, the 24 hours before the deadline, web traffic would spike, thus proving that procrastination is a global phenomenon. And finally, if a student watches the lectures, does the homeworks, and meets our high grading bar, they can also receive a certificate that they can put in their resume, and which anecdotally, many students today are using successfully to find a better job. So many of you will have heard of MOOCs and of the MOOC Massive Open Online Courses movement. Let me show you a bit of what the student experience is like taking one of these classes. Like many others, we use video-based instruction, so this is what one of our lectures will look like.
Game. And generally we'll start with some set of players as an accepted starting point. And then we have to decide what are their strategies, so what are the possible actions that each player can take. Is passive and active enough of a distinction in order to really capture the details of what's going on?
So I want to highlight English captioning, which is useful for non-native speakers, as well as foreign language captioning, which allows us to bring a broader audience to take courses from our partner universities. Rather than posting hour-long lectures, we further encourage instructors to take their content and break it down into, say, 10-minute bite-sized pieces. This allows instructors to also post optional prerequisite and optional advanced material, thus allowing students to navigate through the content in their own order and at their own pace, thus moving us away from the one-size-fits-all model of education. But the class is much more than just lectures, and we know that students learn best not by passively listening, but by practicing with the material. It is often the homeworks or the tests, that's where the learning takes place, not just the lectures. There have been many educational studies, such as this one, which show that it is retrieval practice, meaning being tested on the material, that results in much higher student retention compared to study or even repeated study. Because of that, we've built pervasively into our courses many opportunities for students to do work, to practice with the material. Let me show you an example of what we call an in-video quiz, in which right in the middle of our video lectures, students are not just passively listening, but instead we give them opportunities to test themselves on the material. This is what an in-video quiz looks like.
Discounting, status quo bias, base rate bias, they're all well documented. So they're all well documented deviations from rational behavior.
So in this example, right in the middle of a lecture, the video pauses and the question pops up. The student doesn't get the answer quite right the first time, so he tries again and they get it right before they see an optional explanation before the class moves on. And I want to contrast that with my experience and perhaps some of yours too, teaching in a large lecture hall. If in a large lecture hall you ask a question, only one student gets to attempt an answer. In contrast, on the website, every student gets to attempt an answer and every student gets instant feedback on whether or not they're understanding the material. So I think it is ironic that a website can actually be more interactive than a large lecture class. Beyond the in-video quizzes, most of our classes also have more serious weekly homeworks, which often take the students hours to finish. This includes the ubiquitous multiple choice, as well as short answer questions, math questions, auto-grading of computer programs, as well as grading of structured and simulation and modeling homeworks. In this example, the student is asked to build a financial model in a spreadsheet, which they can then upload to the website to be auto-graded. We can also use a computer to grade circuit models, chemical models, mechanical engineering models, physics models, and so on. Let me show you one example of auto-grading of computer programming. In this example, the student is asked to do a color correction exercise. So they're writing a computer program right there into the web browser. Student hits run, and the answer is not quite correct. The Statue of Liberty looks a bit green, so the student goes back and edits their answer, tries again, and it says output correct at the bottom. So that's the level of interactivity of some of our classes. So far, I've only talked about auto-grading of computer grading of student homeworks. Two advantages of auto-grading are that you can give instant feedback to students. So rather than taking a week to get feedback to them, you can give them immediate feedback. And also, it gives us the resources to allow a student to submit a piece of work over and over, and allows a student to have multiple attempts to succeed at a piece of work before the class moves on. But despite the advantages of auto-grading, not everything can be auto-graded. One lesson I learned about a year ago was, I guess I was visiting the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I was showing these poetry professor our, shiny new multiple choice auto-grading technology. And I learned that if you try to convince a poetry professor to teach a poetry class using only multiple choice, he would invite you to exit his office. But in order to enable instructors to assign more open-ended work, to offer courses in the humanities and other disciplines, we wound up developing a technology known as peer grading that enables more open-ended work to be graded at scale. So the problem is, if you have an essay question and you get 100,000 essays submitted by 100,000 students, how can you grade them all? One professor can't grade 100,000 essays, but what you can do is have the students grade each other's work. Peer grading is an idea that has been well studied in the academic literature in small classes. And it has been shown to work well in classes of, say, 50 students, where here the student grade is highly correlated with the teacher grade, shown on the vertical and horizontal axes. It turns out that self-grading, where you have students grade their own work, is even more accurate and is also pedagogically useful. So what we did was we took the idea of peer grading, previously done only in small classes, and combined it with the computer science idea of crowdsourcing, and today we're run by far the largest peer-graded classes in the history of education. The way it works in one of these classes is, as a student, you'll be asked to first do the work, say write a 300-word essay describing a piece of poetry or critiquing an event in history. Or, in this example, students were asked to build a physical artifact. They were then asked to use their cell phone cameras to take a picture of the artifact that they had built, and then they were asked to upload a picture of what they had built to the website for their picture to be graded by other students in the class. These are actual examples of 3 actual submissions by students in the University of Pennsylvania design class. So as a student, you would be asked to first do the work. Having done the work, we would then train you to grade other students' work. We then ask you to demonstrate proficiency in grading. So we ask you to grade a few pieces of work that the instructor has also graded, and just show us that you can assign grades similar to what the instructor had assigned. And finally, every student is required to grade, say, 5 other students' pieces of work, and in exchange, you get feedback from, say, 5 other students about the quality of your own work. So by averaging the grades of 5 students, we and our university partners have been able to show that peer grading at scale gives accurate grades, reasonably accurate grades, as well as very useful comments, very useful qualitative feedback to students. This is a slide that I got from a Princeton professor who manually graded a small sample of homeworks, and he was able to show that the pure science score is also highly correlated with the teacher or the TA assigned score. For the sake of clarity, in this example, the teaching assistants graded a small sample of homeworks just for the purpose of studying the accuracy of peer grading. In an actual class, the vast majority of homeworks would not be examined by any of the instructors or teaching assistants at the university teaching a class, because of 100,000 homeworks, you just don't have the resources on campus to grade these homeworks. Instead, the score would be entirely determined by the peers in the class, and studies like this show that the peers do assign fairly accurate grades. So peer grading, together with the auto-grading technology, has been key to enable Coursera to offer a broad range of courses that span the humanities, social sciences, the basic sciences, engineering, business, law, finance, as well as at the K-12 level, we have a lot of courses on teacher professional development as well, because I think that whereas Coursera has focused on university education, if we want to help a 7-year-old child obtain a better education, especially with the rise of the new Common Core standards at the K-12 level, we think that a lever to help deliver a better education to the 7-year-old is by training that 7-year-old teacher to become a better teacher. So we have today about 35 courses on teacher professional development to help teachers at mainly the K-12 level interact better with their students. With 100,000 students, one question we sometimes get asked is, how do you answer all of your students' questions? One professor cannot answer 100,000 students' questions. But one of the nice things about teaching a class with so many students is that a real community starts to develop around your course. Having 100,000 students also means that if a student has a question, we can invite them to post their question on the website. And no matter what time of day they were awake thinking about something, there will be someone in some time zone awake at the same time thinking about the same thing, who can therefore discuss it with them. Our discussion forum allows students to post questions and allows other students to answer them. Excuse me. Because of the sheer number of students on our website, when a student posts a question, usually within a few minutes, there'll be a different student that answers that question. The median response time to a student's question on the website, the last time we measured it, was 22 minutes. And having to wait only 22 minutes to get your question answered is, I think, an amazing level of service. So I've talked about the student experience from the perspective of the lectures, the homeworks, and the community. The final major component of the experience that's important to students is the opportunity to earn a certificate. When you have 100,000 students signing up from all around the world, one problem is you don't really know who all these students are. So one of the innovations that I'm most proud of is we developed a system called the Signature Track Program, whereby once a student signs up, we do some work to verify their identity so that we know it really is you sitting at the keyboard submitting the work, and on that basis, we can then issue what we call a verified certificate. The way our technology works is when you sign up for the Signature Track Program, we first check your photo ID. So we ask you to hold up your ID to your webcam so that we can associate your real name and your picture to your identity. Every time you submit a homework then, we use a combination of using your webcam to take your picture, just as you're seeing me on my webcam now, as well as measuring your typing rhythm. So it turns out that the way you type on your keyboard, your typing rhythm is fairly unique to you. It's like a fingerprint. And so using a combination of your typing rhythm and your webcam picture, we can verify that it really is you sitting at your keyboard submitting the work. And on that basis, we can then issue to you, upon your successful completion of a class, a verified certificate that you can put in your resume or take to potential employers and use this to guarantee to them that it really was you participating in the class. And so anecdotally, many of our students have successfully used these Coursera verified certificates to find a better job. Many students are also just proudly hanging these certificates on their wall. I think it's amazing that for a few tens of dollars, you can earn a credential from Duke University and from Coursera that you can proudly show off to your friends and hang up in your office or at your home. So, and moreover, because of the value of our credentials, Coursera is also working with a number of companies to provide these certificates and the signature track program to their employees. One of the nice things about teaching a class with 100,000 students is the data that you can get. We log every mouse click, every keystroke, every homework submission, correct or incorrect. We know if a student fast-forwarded through part of a video. We know if a student asked a question, who answered the question, when they read the response, and how this affected their homework grade. And the detail of data we can collect per student is unprecedented in the history of education. And the number of students we have in a class, tens or hundreds of thousands, is also unprecedented in the history of education. Over the last year, I think Coursera has collected more educational data than the entire academic field of education in the entire 5,000-year history of the academic field of education. And this data is giving us a new window into human learning. By analyzing this data, I would like to understand human learning and use this to improve our student learning. And I would love to do for education what companies like Google, Amazon, and Facebook have done for electronic commerce, only I think education is an even far better course than electronic commerce. So let me share with you just one example of something we've been able to do. In one of our classes, this was actually my class, a funny thing happened to me. I assigned a homework problem, and 2,000 students submitted the same wrong answer. This has never happened to me before. This is a plot of all the students' incorrect submissions, and the big red cross in the upper left-hand corner is the 2,000 nearly identical incorrect solutions. We looked at a small sample of these incorrect solutions and found that every one of them had taken a programming assignment and taken 2 steps of an algorithm, of a mathematical algorithm, and reversed the order in which they did those 2 steps. Having discovered this allowed us to generate a custom error message so that when the next student submitted the same wrong answer, we could pop up a custom error message saying, "Dear student, think about the order in which you're doing these 2 steps." This allows students to much more quickly correct the misconception and move on. So if you think about it, if 2 out of 100 students had submitted the same wrong answer in a normal standard class, you probably won't even have noticed. But it's when 2,000 out of 100,000 students submit the same wrong answer, that's what gives the instructor a very strong signal that there's something to be looked at here. So I think it's ironic that in order to achieve a personalized experience of students, a personalized experience of a custom error message that tells students exactly what they should look at next, to make that level of personalization possible, what was needed was to teach a class with 100,000 students, because that's what gave us the data that made personalization possible. Finally, I've been talking mainly about MOOCs and these hundreds of thousands of students in our classes. Over the last year, I've often been asked, if anyone can go online now and take a free Stanford class, why on earth would anyone still attend Stanford and pay $200,000 for a Stanford degree? I think the answer is that the real value of a Stanford education isn't just the content. Content is increasingly free on the web. Instead, students come to our campuses for the interactions with the professors and for the interactions with other equally bright students. To quote Plutarch, I think the mind is not a vessel that needs filling, but wood that needs igniting. And our role as instructors is not to broadcast content. Instead, it should be to ignite minds. Many of our university partners are now working with us to implement what is called the flipped classroom model, in which they send their students to watch videos, to watch content on the Coursera, to watch the lectures on the Coursera website, either content produced by that university or adopted from a different university. And what this does is it preserves the classroom time, for much deeper, much more interesting interactions with the professor. So rather than using the classroom time to lecture at students, students can get the lecture on a website, which can ironically be more interactive than a large lecture hall, and the classroom time can be used for much more deep, engaging interactions and for creating more time for instructors to deliver what I think is the real value of a university. There have been many educational studies such as this, which show that these more interactive modes of engagement result in much better student attendance, engagement, and learning. And so by implementing this idea called the flipped classroom, we're hopefully improving the quality of education for our on-campus students as well. To be clear, Coursera today serves two equally important populations. One is the hundreds of thousands of students out there that otherwise would never have access to a Stanford or a Caltech or a Duke or a Hopkins or a National University of Singapore course. To them, we give them access to great universities that they previously did not. Second, and equally important, there are also the, say, 50 students attending a Stanford class, and to them, we also help give them a better educational experience by helping universities implement the flipped classroom. Finally, to wrap up, over the last year, I've been fortunate to travel to a lot of countries to speak to a lot of people about education. I've been surprised that even today, a lot of people still say that a great education should be reserved only for the elite. I've been surprised that even today, a lot of people still say that a great education should be reserved only for the privileged. But I say that a great education should be a fundamental human right. And that's why I started MOOCs at Stanford. And that's why at Coursera, we hope that by using technology, we hope to bring a great education to everyone. Thank you very much.